As I said before, current diagrams are used for if you're transiting through a harbor, or in this case, we're going to do all of the Delaware Bay and River. How the current will change as you pass from one area to another. So these are organized north-south. So Bristol is the northernmost point on this diagram, and then we've got the entrance to the harbor, to the bay itself down here. So what you can imagine is if you start up at Bristol and start moving to the south, you would have to begin at one of these points, and this is just hours before the flood begins at Delaware Bay entrance, hours after it begins, hours before the ebb begins, hours after the ebb begins. So if you were to look into the main station pages for Delaware Bay entrance and were to see, that we're going to be departing Bristol, let's say 1 hour before the ebb begins, which is this one here, so you'd be starting here, you would begin your track from there. If you were to be starting 2 hours before the flood begins, you'd be here. If you were starting at the slack water from an ebb going in, or flood going into an ebb, you'd be starting here. So you just pick one of these locations based off of what the condition will be at when you leave for the main station. You would start there, and then you follow your route down using these speed lines. And that's why for these problems, you actually need your triangles with you. So if you're southbound, you're going to be using these angles, and if you're northbound, using that. Remember, you actually have to be going north and going south. So if you're northbound, let's say from here to here, you would set, let's sail at 10 knots. You would align the triangle with the 10 knot line there and start it wherever you are and follow it up there. If you're southbound, you do the same. So like I said, let's say it's 2 hours after the flood begins at Delaware Bay entrance. So we're going to start at that point. And let's say we're departing from Torresdale. So our starting point would be offset slightly to down here. We're sailing at 12 knots in this case. So you take your triangle, you set it. Actually, in this case, I'm going to use this receipt because it's a little bit easier for you to see. It's not because it isn't transparent. But you would set your angle to 12 knots. Then you would slide it over, trying to preserve the angle. You could use your actual triangles to do this more precisely. We're coming to that 2 there. So you find the 2, where the 2 intersects Torresdale. And then this is going to show your representation through time as you pass down the Delaware River towards the entrance, what the current conditions will be at each location. So you can see, starting from Torresdale, by the time you get to Chestnut Street in Philadelphia, you will have a speed of something between 1.7 and 1.2, because we were right between the two, so let's say 1.4. And you are technically in the ebb section. If you continue down further, you can see this is the line of demarcation, and right there it says flood. So when you reach this point, that is when you change from ebb to slack water. Now you're in the flood. And if you continue your track further down, let's see, by the time you get to Reedy Island, you have a speed of 2.2 knots flood. Then as you go further, when you get to Shipjohn Shoal, you're actually right at the slack water, turning back into an ebb current now. So that's how you would read this. You pick your starting location, you place horizontally, you select your horizontal location based off of what period of time you are before or after the flood or ebb. Pick your vertical location based off of what location you're in. You pick your angle based off of your speed and whether you're headed south or north. And then you just follow that line down and see where you will cross into a ebb current or a flood current and what your speeds will be at each place. So let's say the question could ask you something like, you are in Edgemoor, 2 hours after an ebb current. headed northbound at 5 knots, what will the current conditions be at Eagle Point when you reach it? So first, Edgemoor is where you're starting. You're looking for 2 hours after the ebb. So this is hours after ebb. So there's your 2. So you follow this line down until you get to, oh, I missed it. There's Edgemoor right there. So without losing your spot, then you come to the side, 5 knots northbound. So you get your angle there. Bring your angle over to where Edgemoor and 2 hours after the ebb begin. And then you follow this up. And I believe I said Eagle Point. So you follow the line until you reach Eagle Point, which looks like it's right about here. And so then you look at the speed conditions. You see we just passed this line of demarcation. So we're in the ebb section. And even though there's not a clear number right by us because we were right here, up here is 1.2, down here is 1.5. So you could say 1.3. So in that problem, you would have gone, you would say that by the time you reach Eagle Point, you will have a speed of probably it's actually less because we're closer to the 0 here, 0.8 knots. Now the question would never have you end at a point that doesn't have a number. They would plan it in advance so you land right on a number or right between 2 numbers. So let's say if you landed here, you would get 1.2 ebb. So to review, you pick your horizontal alignment off of your hours before or after the flood or ebb, wherever you land. In this case, defined off of the Delaware Bay main station, but it could be, up here, we've got New York. So you could do the same for New York. You then pick your vertical location based off of where your starting point is, your angle based off of your speed, and then you follow that, after picking your starting point, you follow that angle down until you get to your ending location, or maybe it will ask you at what point in time or at what location will you reach the flood current. So if it was a question like that, you would follow your angle down until you hit this line of demarcation where you went from ebb to flood, and you would say, if I hit it right there, that's at Chelsea Docks. So either way, all you're doing is watching your track line and seeing where it passes into a new section and what the speed will be at that section and what location you will be at when you get there.